on this episode of the Mad Rush podcast.
Look, I gotta say, with the one-woman show, I play 15 characters in 65 minutes. I play my mother. I play my siblings and my father, but I play all these characters. No, there are no costume changes. It's just me in a chair. You can watch it on my website. But the thing is it was just, I was doing it for me. It was cathartic for me. I wanted the closure for me. And when the lights went to black and I looked up at the audience, they were there right with me. And there was this container where they could see all of my trauma as a mirror for their own.
Welcome to the Mad Rush podcast. I'm Trisha Addix, the original sorority rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. Today, it is my honor to have the celebrated Vietnamese-American author, playwright, and performer, Susan Lieu, on Mad Rush. I would take up the entirety of this podcast if I were to list her accomplishments, as there are many, 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 many. So welcome, Susan. I can't wait to get into it.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So I read your book, The Manicurist Daughter, and that's the thing I most want to talk about today. I was so blown away by the real and exposed emotions you expressed. And so I wanted to have you on here to tell us your story and why you wrote it. This obviously doesn't have anything to do with Sorority Rush, but most of these podcasts don't. So anyway, tell us why your story and why you wrote it.
Yeah, I never meant to write my family tragedy. It's something that has been a secret my entire life. And I felt like I had a reckoning to finally share the story out loud when I decided to become a mother. And so the story starts when I'm 11 years old.
Wait, I hate to interrupt you, but how old is your child?
No. 4.5.
Gotcha. Boy or girl?
Boy. His name's Art.
Love Art. Oh, I love a little boy. Okay, sorry, continue. I always have to interject my thoughts on whatever. So go ahead. I won't interrupt you again, or I maybe will, but let's go.
So the story I was never meant to tell starts when I was 11 years old, and my mom's 38. We collide in the kitchen, and she doesn't want me to go to volleyball tryouts. I tell her I hate her. I stomp off to school, and she goes in for plastic surgery. She goes in for a tummy tuck, the narrowing of her nostrils, and a chin implant, and thinks she's going to come home with her beautiful new body the next day. She loses oxygen to her brain. The plastic surgeon waits until 14 minutes before he makes a 911 call. She's in a coma for 5 days and then flatlines. And what she didn't realize when she walked in under the knife is he was on probation, had 19 lawsuits against him, and didn't have medical malpractice insurance. And for the next 20 years, my family has never spoken of her or what happened ever again. And so I'm the black sheep in the family where I ask about who she was, are they okay? Are you even doing okay? And everyone's like, Susan, hush, you're too emotional. You're living in the past. You need to let it go. And I'm sitting there going like, but I'm 12.
Wait, so you couldn't talk. So when she flatlined, well, first off, I obviously don't need to know the doctor, but where were you? Like
San Francisco, 1996.
So you're in the United States.
We're in the United States.
This is not like.
It's not Vietnam, baby.
Well, even or anywhere, you hear stories about this, but not in the United States, in San Francisco. Wow. So
Yeah.
this happened. And then how did they tell you, or who told you?
I mean, I come back home from volleyball tryouts, which I wasn't allowed to go do. And my brother from college is in the driveway being like, you got to pack your stuff. Mom's in a coma. And up until this point, the only idea I knew about a coma is at our family nail salon, we would watch soap operas because that's what the customers want to watch. And with comas, you have a 1 in a million chance of surviving. And then they wake up 6 years later and everything's great again. I thought a coma, everything always works out. So I wasn't really nervous. I go pack my bags and we drive the hour to San Francisco. And it's crazy because my mother, the powerhouse, the pillar of our family, is just listless, and like she's just, her hands are clammy. Her face is sunken in, all these chemicals are being pumped in her. And I was like, what is happening? Like, this crazy nightmare that needs to change. And I remember in Vietnamese, they just kept saying she had a stomach surgery. I didn't have the context of everything that was happening.
Right.
And even and 5 days later, she flatlined. And even at the funeral, no one really talked about what happened. And I remember as we were burying her body, all my elders would come up to me and they would like pat me on the head or pat me on the shoulder and be like, do well in school.
What?
And that was it. And no one hugged me. No one touched me. No, like there was no emotional grieving. And a week later, I go back to school. This girl runs up to me and she goes, what's wrong with you? Your mom die or something? And I'm like,
Wow.
Oh my God, does everyone know what happened? I'm in 6th grade, right? And then all I could do, my instincts was run to the yard duty lady, bury my head in her boobs, touching the whistle, and finally get hugged.
Golly.
And to this day, my family still hasn't had a conversation about what happened.
And so is your dad still with us?
Yeah, he's still with us.
And your brother, so how many siblings did you have?
Yeah, so I have 3 older siblings. I'm the youngest of 4.
And none of them have you've ever not talked about it with them?
So 2 of them have come to my plays and come to my book talks, and they can talk about me talking about my mom, right? Like their thoughts on my projects, but we don't actually have vulnerable conversations about my mom. And then one of the older brothers and my dad and I pretend that I don't do any of this. And so we just pretend that this doesn't exist, even though it's a huge part of my life. And my dad's always like, why don't you become a loan officer?
Okay.
So that's family for you, which is like, there's some denial, right? There's some coping mechanism, right? For people to protect themselves. And I think for the longest time as a young person, all the way up into my 30s, I thought, what's wrong with me, right? Because everyone was basically shaming me into silence. And as a Vietnamese daughter, you're supposed to abide by your elders. They're right, you're wrong, And I was sitting there going like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep asking these questions? And it wasn't until I got older I realized I was like, oh my God, we're all dysfunctional.
Well, we're recording this right after Christmas, so I'm sure a lot of people can relate, or after the holidays, because the family dynamics are pretty fraught during that time. But so you didn't ever talk about it?
No.
And then how did that lead you to talk about it a lot? Or, I mean, write a book and
do a one-woman show. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
It all kind of came to a head after I got married, and my dad and aunts were like, you're not getting any younger. Your eggs are getting older. You need to have babies now. And I was sitting there feeling that pressure, right, to abide by my elders. But that stark guilt and fear was, how do I become a mother if I never knew my own? If things went wrong, who would I call? Like my sister and I couldn't even talk about motherhood, and she had just had some kids. We just can't talk about it. Like it's so touchy. And then it collided with this like plot B line, which was, how do I tell my kid, be what you want in life if I never did it myself? Right. And for me, my passion was performance. And I was a failed stand-up comic. Like things were on the rise for me. And then I got heckled at a charity comedy show. And then I walked away from the microphone for 3 years. And so for me, I knew I was not living in my integrity.
Right.
And so I said, okay, if I'm going to become a mom, I want to get the performance wiggles out. I'm going to just deal with whatever this calling is. And then once I do, I'll take out my IUD and become a mom. I felt like that's how I was going to solve life, was through a checklist.
Right.
But the thing is trying to do solo performance and to answer the question, who was my mom? I hit a wall, right? If my family wouldn't talk, and I did crazy things. I searched for the plastic surgeon, and I found out he died. And then I contacted his kids, through letters. And then finally I got a voicemail from the daughter. And like, I was grasping for straws. I wanted so bad to find closure and healing because my family wouldn't give it to me. And lo and behold, like once the doctor's family stopped talking to me, the story isn't actually about the doctor and avenging my mother's death. It's about connecting with my family and knowing my mother, right? And also knowing myself. And I learned all that by putting on one-woman shows.
That's super cool. What about, so you had this, and you're obviously married. You had this disconnect. Well, disconnect is kind of a very extreme word for what you had, but did you have a support system besides your family? I mean, again, not trying to bring it back to Rush, but like I have my family, but then I have my chosen family, which was my sorority sisters and my friends. And so did you have that? And like, how did your husband, like, is he Vietnamese also?
Oh, he's Korean.
Korean.
Yeah.
So what is that? I'm not going to ask a stupid question, but like, are the cultures similar? I know that they're not the same place. So before you ding me on that.
Yeah, they're very different food.
Yeah.
No, I would say.
I love them both.
We're not choosing sides here, guys. But I think what the two cultures have in common is that mental health is extremely stigmatized. And vulnerability, emotional connection, emotional intimacy, it's seen as like, don't go there. It's seen as weak. It's seen as individual, right? Okay. And so like all of this is not okay to talk about within my own family and especially with my in-laws, right? Like, it's just like, why bring it all down? Why live in the past? Like, let's move forward. Which, when you look at the effects of war on countries, right, and on people who are usually the losers in wars, like the civilians, they need to move forward. They are always in fight or flight mode. And so I can now have compassion towards that approach of how you deal with trauma, which is don't deal with it because it's not going to get you anything, right? Like, let's just move forward. I get that now. But at the same time, when we don't process this through our support network, right? If we don't have a way to grieve, we're going to pay that tax. And it's going to come out in toxic ways in other behaviors anyways, right? So to answer your initial question, yes, I have an amazing support network. In fact, if you read the acknowledgments, I remember when I was recording my audiobook, I was like, they were like, it was 5 days long. And they were like, well, you definitely have to come back for pickups, in case anything, like you just have to adjust a line. And they were like, and certainly for your acknowledgments, because this is the longest acknowledgments we've ever seen. Because part of it was thanking this community that has held me. All the surrogate mothers, like all of my high school friends' moms, all of the advisors of all these student groups that I was a part of. I was a part of those groups because I felt affirmed and seen in a way that my dad just didn't have time to, nor the emotional capacity to. Right. And so, yes, my sisterhood is so big. And yes, I've done so much personal growth stuff where I feel deeply connected to so many people around the world. And if you read my memoir, you'll also know that I was in a cult. And I also sought belonging through that kind of collective group as well. Right. So I think constantly as humans, we are searching to belong, to be loved and accepted, seen and celebrated, to experience that unconditional love. And so for me as an adolescent, when it was basically like, hey, Susan, when you ask questions about your mom, you're kind of bringing the group down, or like, Susan, when you want to eat more food, you're going to get fat and no one's going to love you and you're going to die alone. Apropos my mother's botched tummy tuck, right? So it was just kind of like, I was growing up with the idea that my worthiness was really conditional. Wow. And so it was so refreshing to have friends and advisors and mentors, all those folks where I just felt like I didn't have to achieve to be worthy. I didn't have to prove. I didn't have to lose weight for them. I just could be me. And I think that's just really reflective of just where my family was generation-wise, culturally. Like, I don't fault them. I am not mad at them. I can see under the context of which my elders grew up that women's worth through their bodies. They weren't allowed to finish high school. They had to go support their families. Then they'd get married off, right? And your body was your value. But guess what, guys? We are not living in post-Vietnam War 1970s and 1980s anymore. We are living in the 2000s in America, and things can be different. So really, the way my elders behaved in that way and said all those things, it was a way of protection, right? Like it was a way, they were trying to be helpful, and that was them loving me, even though I felt like I always had to prove my worth. And it created a lot of anxiety in me that decades later, I'm still trying to unpack, right?
That rings so true to me, even though I'm obviously not Vietnamese-American. I remember my grandfather telling me one time, who was deep South granddad, perfectionist, went to Georgia Tech. When I went to Georgia, he was like, not speaking to me. It was a much lesser institution. It's not now. And I don't think it was then, but he did. And I remember one time I was like, oh, Skipper, that's what I called him. Skipper, you look so cute in your outfit, and just trying to connect with him. And he said, well, you can never wear it because you're too fat. And I remember that, but that was just in his mind. Like, we were not going to have a conversation about anything if it didn't come around to his disapproval of how I was fat or overweight. And I mean, that sticks. I think about that all the time. I still do. Like, I'll think about, so my dog, which I'll probably cry, but my dog Skipper just died 2 days ago. And so I've been thinking a lot about, thank you, but I've been thinking a lot about Skipper, just the name in general. So I was been thinking about my grandfather, and like, of all the memories I have of him, that is the one that sticks out. Like, I mean, he took me sailing a million times, all the things. That's why we called him Skipper. But like, that is the thing that sticks in my head. So I get that. I mean, from a completely different cultural standpoint, that feeling, and an older person, that was what he thought. He did not think my husband was going to want to marry me because I was fat.
Oh my God. You should have seen the look on my aunt's faces when I was like, and my husband, he's Korean, which I say in my book as a joke, is like, he's a gold standard for Asian hotness. Like, my husband kind of looks like a movie star. And they're like, how? You're so fat and ugly, and I'm like, so, but what I think you're alluding to is how deep trauma cuts, especially when you're a child. Right. And then how we cannot undo that. Like, if I were to remember memories of my father, yes, I don't remember all the good ones. I remember the bad ones, because in a way, that's our brain trying to protect us, to be like, don't forget that, because if you want to survive, don't forget that, right?
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Like, how are we supposed to move forward? How can we see that actually, if I'm, as an adult, allowed to evolve and grow, can I let other people, like Skipper, also evolve and grow, right? But the tender part of us, our inner child, is still holding on to that trauma because we're trying to protect, to survive. But the question is if that trauma is still haunting us, and it pervades all of our experiences. And I said in the book, all the memories of my mother the death of my mother goes through this sieve in my life. Like, all of my experiences are always going through that sieve. And the question is, like, whose life am I living, and for who and why, right? Because that trauma is actually leading my life. And what can I do now as an adult with full agency to free myself from that trauma, to transform it into healing so that it doesn't haunt me anymore?
So is it working? I'm not fascinated, but I mean, like, I'm just, it's ringing very true to me. Again, it's just, the whole rejection thing is why I have my business, because I was rejected and as a freshman in college, and that was a huge trauma for me, and it's what shaped my life, and it's why I do what I do. But that's very fascinating. Like, is it working for you? Like the book and the one woman shows, like, maybe I should, I have a podcast, so there's that.
Yeah. I mean, if that's your one woman show, baby. Look, I got to say, with the one woman show, I play 15 characters in 65 minutes. I play my mother. I play my siblings and my father.
So
And it was,
is it just you play your mother like what you remember or what you want it to be?
I guess, well, there's different scenes, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So there are moments like with my mother and my father within the refugee escape, right? And their conversations. Okay, maybe I had some creative license to create that conversation, but their idea of should they escape or not, like that was
Right.
real, right? And there's this moment where we kind of do like a Christmas Carol thing where my mother comes back as the main ghost to help me understand the different perspectives of my siblings that they won't tell me. A little bit more creative license, right?
Right.
So maybe it's the mother that I've been channeling, right? And what I wish her to be, right?
Right.
But I play all these characters. No, there are no costume changes. It's just me in a chair. You can watch it on my website. But the thing is it was just, I was doing it for me. It was cathartic for
I was
me
going
to
to say it
finally
sounds
have,
like therapy.
I call it therapeutic theater.
Right.
I wanted the closure for me. And when the lights went to black and I looked up at the audience, they were there right with me. And there was this container where they could see all of my trauma as a mirror for their own. And every single night the show would end and then a line would form and people wanted to talk to me. And it felt like the intersection of a marriage and a wedding and a funeral. You know,
Right.
it felt like everyone needed to tell me their secrets because the thing is, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've heard that we're only as sick as our secrets. So if we actually don't have secrets, if we can release them out there, if we can free them, then we can feel this liberation inside, right? Like we can feel that relief and that release.
Mhm.
So that's what my art was. It was for me, but it was also for the collective, right? It's a tragic story, but I also make it really funny because
Sure.
I need to give you moments to breathe so you can stay deep with me. Because
Right.
it is scary to go deep.
Yeah.
It is so scary, but I want you to stay there because what I say in my book several times is when we feel, we heal. And I have this belief that if we can go through all the emotions, if we can go through instead of deny, we can liberate. And so, yes, I did that with a theater and I performed the show 60 times to 7,000 people in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
I did all the marketing myself, friends. And then my memoir
Were
has
you
come out.
in was it one theater or did you travel?
I did a 10-city national tour when I was in my second trimester.
Whoa.
I know. See, I'm a procrastinator. So like for a while I was like, oh, I want to do this tour. I want to do this tour. But then I was
So
so
you waited till you
scared.
got pregnant and then your second trimester and do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh my
Because then
God. That's
once
like
I
the
found out,
polar
yeah.
opposite of me.
Oh, are you a planner?
Oh my gosh. It's a problem. Yeah.
I want to be you, but I can't. So then I had to just get pregnant. And then I put out my tour. You know what I mean, though? Like, it's like, I think for me, the perfectionist in me was like, oh my God, I have this tour. Like, am I going to sell out shows? Like, what if I lose money? What? And then right when I knew I was pregnant, I just did the math and I was like, well, that's the only, I got this 3-month window. So mama got to go, you know, like,
So
and
did
so,
you had you written a script or like how did that work?
yeah.
I mean, that's
So
a pretty big leap of faith or I don't know what, a leap of insanity
I
maybe? I
have
don't
an MBA, not an MFA, people. Like, this is like nuts. I was like, I got all this debt just to be an artist. Okay. So my first one woman show was November 2017. And then I did 5 iterations of it. And the 5th one, February 2019, is the world premiere of 140 Pounds How Beauty Killed My Mother. And that was a sold out run in Seattle. And then I did it like a show in like San Francisco and Portland. I was like, okay. And then my husband's like, I feel like you're neglecting me in my marriage. And I was like, okay. And he was like, let's go climb Mount Whitney rock climbing. And I was like,
Were you a
okay.
rock climber?
No, I mean, I knew how to rock climb, but girlfriend, like the idea of a good time to me is like eating a gummy and watching Netflix. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, I want to be grounded on a couch. I don't want to be hanging midair. And so this 8-hour rock climb turns into this 23-hour nightmare where I think I'm going to die. And
Is
then
he
he
a
was
big
like,
rock climber? Like,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah,
At least
yeah.
that makes a little sense, but
Yeah,
still.
he said he always wanted me to go mountaineer, and I was like, "Oh my God, like I don't want to be outside, not on a couch."
I
I
don't want
was
to be stoned on a couch
yeah,
watching Netflix.
you know what I mean? Like I was like,
Yeah.
"That's it's exciting to me." Anyways, so well, turns out, like after I was like, I thought I was gonna die. Then it was crazy because I had all these cravings. I was like, I want to eat donuts all the time. And if you know me, even though I have a chocolate company, I don't like sweets. I don't like sweets. I don't like
Well,
sweets. I
wait,
don't.
explain. You got to back up. I'm sorry. We're not just going to
Okay.
gloss over that. You have a
Okay.
chocolate company, which I did know, but let's first off say the name because I can't.
It's called Sokola Chocolatier, and Sokola means chocolate in Vietnamese. My sister and I
And
started it when we were teenagers in front of my dad's nail salon in Santa Rosa, California, at a farmer's market.
and it's still in existence.
It's still in existence, and we just opened our second storefront in the San Francisco airport.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's artisanal chocolate truffles, Vietnamese inspired. And we do chocolates for a lot of major brands out there.
And you don't like sweets.
Yeah, I don't like sweets. I'm very savory through and through. Like
Yes,
once
me
in a
too.
while, I'll try the product just to be like, oh, how's it going? Cool. But anyway, so I don't like sweet. And then I started downing donuts, right? And I was like, there's something wrong with me.
You're pregnant.
I'm hanging out with my girlfriend. We're having girls' weekend. I'm gonna like drink hella wine. I was like, guys, this is crazy, but I'm just gonna get a pregnancy test. It's so weird. And then it was like plus plus plus, like it was like stained red. And I was
That's
like,
where I was like, like that's a given.
and then I showed it to my girlfriend. I was like, is this real? And everyone's like cheering, and I was like, totally not cheering because I was just I didn't. I basically got
You're
pregnant.
like, I
after
gotta do a play right now before we cheer.
Yeah. No. So I had done the premiere, and then we went rock climbing, and then first attempt I get pregnant. So the baby really needed to come out, I guess. And once I knew that, I go get my ultrasound. They're like, I was like, oh, I love surprises. Don't tell me the sex. And then they're like, well, we have a surprise for you. You're way more pregnant than you think. And I was like, oh my God, what? And so I did the math backwards, and I was like, oh my God, I got pregnant like the night before Mount Whitney.
Oh wow.
So in a way, even though I thought I was gonna die, I thought like, oh my, like I just wanted to die. Like it was like hypothermia. We were so cold, we ran out of food and water. Like I was just like, my husband's like, a helicopter's not gonna come unless you have broken bones. I was like, break my bones.
Break a bone, buddy.
Just break them.
Just break one that heals quickly.
So then I thought it was all over, and it was kind of crazy because I had something else to live for.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty intense. I found out I was pregnant. So my older son, they're only 16 months apart, and my older son's nanny, I was driving her home and because I still worked, and I was like, do you mind if we stop at the gas station? I really want a sour punch straw. And she was like, girl, you're pregnant. And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, no one in the history of ever has said as an adult that they want a sour punch straw. And damn if she wasn't right. I was like, maybe I'll get a pregnancy test while I get the sour punch straws. But yeah, like you're all of a sudden, I haven't wanted one before or since. Like, I don't even know what I don't even know how I knew what it was. But
how crazy, because you had 2 under 2.
Yeah, it was, that talk about
my God.
hella wine. I was like, ooh,
sorry.
they're great, great kids. And the older one had colic. So when I had the younger one, I was expecting that. And the younger one did not have colic at all.
Well,
So
that's good news.
yeah, that was very good news. But so, okay, so you're pregnant, you're doing this show, which again, planner does not compute. And so did you do it? You did it for how long?
The run was about a year. So I started in February and then took it on a 10-city national tour, October through December. Come back to Seattle to only do the sequel, over 140 pounds, 8.5 months pregnant.
What?
And the show was an hour and a half at this point.
So wait, you're 8.5 months pregnant doing the what is your husband saying? Again, we don't need permission. I'm just curious. Like, what is your husband saying at this point? Is he like, I've married a lunatic? Like what?
Oh, no. Well, no. Okay.
What are the in-laws saying? Let's back up.
Oh my God, what are the in-laws saying? I don't even know how much to reveal. I think they don't know what kind of box to put me in.
Yeah, there's a shock.
Let me just put it at that.
I don't know what kind of box to put you in. You know, this is a sorority podcast, right?
I wish I was in a sorority. I
I'm
think I'd
just
be
teasing.
awesome at
it. You would be awesome at it, but we wouldn't know what sorority to help you get into
I
because
know.
they don't need that.
I think the only conflict with my husband was, so after I told you the show took 5 iterations before I had the final concept that I took on the tour. And it was at the 3rd one where I'm still doing this on the side. I'm a management consultant. Remember, I have an MBA from Yale, and I got fired.
You got fired?
I got fired from my job. Like, I gotta tell you, I've been like type A overachiever all my life. And it wasn't until I moved to Seattle that I just like had like
decided to take gummies and sit on the couch instead of
I wish I did that. No. But like, it was this moment where, I mean, look, I was like a square peg in a round hole. Like, I was trying to be in corporate America and do this job that my dad always wanted me to do, that had 401k, that had PTO, that had all these things that when you own a nail salon, you don't get to have.
Right.
Which I understand that as a boat person, you would want all those things for your kids. But for me, I just dreaded going to work. I felt like I wasn't using all my talents. Even though I was kind of coasting, I hated my life, okay? Which is a very privileged thing to say. But that was my honest truth, which is I hated going to work. I hated going to work. And I hated the weekends because then I knew Monday would come.
Right.
So I was a terrible wife because I was always grumpy about, like when you're not happy within, it's obvious, right? It just like spills over to the rest of your life. So it was actually this weird blessing from the universe to get fired.
Yeah.
Because then it was like, okay, I'm at a crossroads. Do I continue to apply for jobs to maximize income? Like, what's the highest paying job I'm going to get given my work experience? Or do I take this big risk? Planner and you was like, do I take this big risk and see where this is going to go? And my husband was like, but you love being busy. Like, why don't you just keep doing this as a hobby? And I was just sitting there going like, my intuition is really telling me. Like at this point, I had only gotten like $500 grants. Like I'd gotten like really small press and like hyper local press. Like it wasn't a big deal yet, right? But for me, I felt like there was this growing momentum. And also I was learning so much about my mother. And I felt like there was so much energy with the audience, even though it was still a small audience, right? It was at this point still like 80% my friends.
Right.
And 20% like new people. Right. But for some reason, I was feeling this energy and I was like, I need to do this. I need to do this for a year. I need to see where this goes. And so I said to him, look, if you don't approve of me doing this, I'm happy to move out, go, be in some apartment, like not near the center of town, like minimize my costs. I just need to figure this out because I know if I don't, I'll always resent you and I'll always dangle this over your head and it'll always anger me because I couldn't do the things that I felt so deeply intuitive that I needed to do.
Right.
And so for 2 weeks, we didn't talk in the house and it was hella awkward because he was just kind of sitting there being like, we just bought a house, so now we have a mortgage. Plus you still have business school loans. How are we going to make this work? And I'm sitting here going like,
is he employed at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
He's employed. He's very employed. He's great at keeping jobs. and I'm sitting there going like, I'm okay to bow out of this relationship. I really am. Like, I don't want this to be a thing that's wedged between us because I just know me and it's fine. It's fine. We don't have kids yet, right? It's okay. And then finally after the 2 weeks, he was like, all right, I've come around. Let's time box this. So as MBA people, we were like, okay, how much money do I need to make in a year? What are my financial targets? And then when we come back after the year, I either go back to corporate America or I don't. And then I said, okay. And I was like, all right, so all I need to do is start my own nonprofit consulting firm and then have my own clients. But with the expectation that we're going to taper off services when my show comes around. And after my show is done, we'll see what happens, right? So I got clients. They were bankrolling my time to do this. I met with my director. I was writing the show. I was fine-tuning it. And then I had the world premiere and I sold it out 2 weekends. I found corporate sponsorship. I fundraised so that I could subsidize tickets for low-income communities. I marketed the hell out of it, and it was more than I could have ever imagined.
That's so cool. That's definitely a leap of whatever. But I
Oh,
mean, but it worked out. So
I mean, now we can look back on it and be like, oh, I
right.
had a memoir, and it was like the best book of 2024 for NPR and Smithsonian and Elle Magazine. Like, we can look back and be like, it worked out. But I gotta tell you, along the way, I was like clawing. I
Hmm.
was doubting myself. I was so stressed out every time I needed to send out newsletters or like tell people to buy tickets. Like, it was definitely confronting all of my deepest fears around, am I going to be rejected by people?
Right. Yeah, and
But
I feel
yeah,
that same. I feel that same. My husband told me his goal for 2025 is for me to quit saying it's all smoke and mirrors. Like he's like, you actually have done this, but like you still don't believe in yourself. Or not
mhm.
in. It's not that I don't believe in myself. I fully believe in myself, but like you just, it's putting yourself out there every day is tough. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
Or I don't know, tough is the right word. And like you did say something that really resonates. The privilege to do this. I mean, I don't have to work, so me doing this is just a leap of whatever. I want to be creative and all that stuff, but I do get that it's a complete privilege to be able to do this or time box it. I've never heard that phrase. I'm going to start using that, but because I did not have an MBA. Um, but yeah, no, I mean it's a cool thing to be able to do, and
but see,
that's
with that privilege comes guilt, right?
right. Yeah,
Like, because you're like, but then I can't really complain if I'm having a hard day because I
right,
get to do this. But I mean, it's like, just like, gotta cut all that out and be like, okay, reframe. I get to do this today. Okay, or maybe today's not my day.
right,
Okay, but this is the cards you've been dealt. So you get to play those cards and you're allowed to play those cards.
right,
So yes, um and I also need to acknowledge that I have a safety net because I'm married.
right.
Because I gotta tell you, girl, book deal advances, they dry up and they come
Yes.
in quarterly chunks. And there was a moment when I was writing, because it took me about 2 years to write the book, where I'm like, ooh, I hit red in my bank account, and I was sitting there and
Hmm.
being like, how am I gonna make this work? And it was such a moment of failure, right? Where I was like, because I have my business account and like all the things that I do, it's like, is this a sustainable business or not? Right? Like, is
Right,
this worthwhile? Does this society show that I'm valuable? And I find a lot of value by money. I'm not motivated by money, ironically, because my husband's
right,
like, why don't you work at a hedge fund? And I was like, why don't I? But I would never cut it there because I don't care, right?
right.
But at the same time, when I remember when I hit red, about my second year of writing, I felt like, oh my God, I felt so ashamed. I felt so ashamed because I was like, Marvin, I need to borrow money. And he's like,
Isn't it?
there's no borrowing. It's like
Is his name Marvin?
Marvin, like
That's
Starvin'
the
Marvin.
best name ever.
Why is it the best name ever?
I don't know. I just love that Marvin. Like
Wait, can I?
I've never met a Marvin.
I know who's not black. He's like
Well,
Korean.
no, I've never met a Marvin, Black, Korean, or anything. I've
Okay,
never
yeah,
met a
yeah, his name's
Marvin.
Marvin. So here's something cute, kind of weird. But so I'm Susan, he's Marvin, and my son is Art. So we're the smart family. We're smart. Just so you remember, when people going around saying
Mhm.
names, you never remember people's names. So I'd be like, hey, we're smart. And then they were like, you're nerds. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going nerd.
Yeah,
Going.
we nerd
So,
up.
my name growing up was Grody. That was my last name, like to the max. Like I grew up in the 80s. So Valley Girl, Grody to the max. And then I marry Greg Addicts. And so the whole drug addicts kind of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to like
You
just,
didn't win in the last name game.
yeah, the last names, but that's all right. I won in the husband lottery, just not the last name lottery. So that's good. So
Well,
do you feel like you're, going back to this with your mom, do you feel like peace with it or with, what did that bring you? I mean, so again, to talk about myself for one more second, like I do a lot of this because I need a creative outlet, like writing the book and the movie and all the things that I'm doing, but it's not really cathartic, but I feel like yours is still very creative, but like you had a goal to like, am I wrong about that?
I think after I did the show, and then at the New York premiere along my tour, there was a literary agent sitting in the audience, which if I knew, I would have freaked out, but I didn't know, thank God. And eventually we're working on the book proposal and we sell the book. And I realized, given math, since I'm a nerd, I was like,
Smart
oh my
nerd.
God, I've got a chance to publish this book when I'm 38 years old, which is the same age when my mom died. And it would be my homage to her.
Oh,
So
wow.
I saw what that timeline was and I was like, okay, got to pony up and write this book real fast. Right. And part of me, there's just so much symbolism, right? Like that was my own personal meaning that I had. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's for her. It's for me. It's for us.
Right.
Yeah. So I got to say, because remember, before I started this journey, I actually didn't really know who my mother was because no one ever talked about her, right? So by doing the play and by doing the book, because a book is 300 pages single space, so
Right.
you can't really run away, right? Like with theater, I have scene changes and it goes really fast, and we can have all these devices. But with 300 single space pages, devil's in the details, right? And
Right.
and for me, I had to really like fact check finally with my aunts who finally would talk, or like really make sure that this would be our family narrative. You know, like this is, no one else in my family is going to write a book. Pretty sure about that, right?
Clearly.
But I had to get it really right also for our family too, and for my kiddo and all of my nieces and nephews, for them to know where they come from. So there was this like historical precision that I had to wrap around it, but also this is my time to fully paint the portrait of my mother in color, right, as I knew her. And I got to tell you, I would say like my adolescence, like age 11 to 22, whenever Mother's Day came around, her death anniversary or her birthday, I was like so stoic. Like I pretended it didn't exist. Or like if people were like, oh, what are you doing for Mother's Day? I like start like just like silently bawling, right? Like just tears coming down my face and I have nothing to say. Like, and now when those dates come up, it's joyful. I have my mom's picture up in my office. I have an altar. My son knows her face and brought her picture in for Dia de los Muertos in his preschool, and he's like, my grandma's dead, you know. And it's like, but the point is like she's a part of my living experience now. And I got to tell you, the things I've pulled off with the theater and the book was not just my own doing. Like, I really feel like my mom came with me on this journey. And there's a number of moments in the book where I talk about spirit channelers and psychics. And once I have verified that that person is like legit, right, they're not trying to manipulate me for money or whatever.
Right.
I talked to my mom and I'm like, there's this point where I was like, Mom, like, should I stop doing this? Like, do you want me to stop? If you want me to stop, I'm going to stop. And she was like, this is not about you. This is about the work that we need to do because we're healers.
That's really
cool.
Isn't your dad a spirit channeler? Am I wrong about that?
You're totally right about that. He is a spirit channeler, but he didn't do it as a profession. It would just happen in the living room, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't a thing that he refined. It was always like really intense and like really all over the place and loud. And he's a very introverted man. He never wants the attention on him, but he did have the ability, right? And so there was a moment when my mom was in a coma and she came to us through him and said it was too late and she couldn't come back.
Oh, wow.
You know, and that was a really intense experience.
Yeah, that's very intense. Well, talk about channeling your mom. That's very, very, very cool that you feel that she not approves it, but wanted you to do it.
Oh yeah, we got work to do.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is through my work, through my art, she's more alive than she's ever been. And even though I had resistance from my family, now I see small changes in my siblings. Like with my oldest brother, he admitted, because I would, there's two siblings that were kind of along for the ride. Eventually they had a change in opinion and they started to support me. And so I had them come watched the show for the first time, 140 pounds, I invited them on stage afterwards for a talk back. And my brother shared that as I was asking him for photos to include as multimedia in the show, he started to think about our mom.
Oh, wow.
And then finally he put up an altar in his kitchen for her so that she is a part of his kids' lives and his life, right? Visually,
Oh,
that she's more
that's
prominent.
cool. Yeah.
And then my sister was like, she started sharing dreams that she had of mom and her, and she would text them to me. And remember, this is someone who we've never talked about my mom with. And now
Right.
she's like, at least sharing a dream. Okay. Or with our chocolate company, we made a hard right where it was like, okay, let's really put in more Vietnamese inspired flavors instead of just traditional French flavors. Like, let's really infuse our heritage here. And I think that's because her relationship with our mom deepened, right? Like there was this place of like, let's celebrate who we are and where we come from instead of being so ashamed that we're Vietnamese. Like instead of just always trying to assimilate into American culture, here, let's feel proud of who we are and where we come from. And that includes celebrating our mother.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, on a lighter thing, give me an example of a Vietnamese flavored chocolate. I'm just curious.
Well, our little Saigon box is a 4-course meal in 9 flavors. So you start out with jasmine tea and Vietnamese coffee beverage. Then you eat, there's a pho flavor and there's a sriracha chili flavor.
So it's chocolate that tastes like pho?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're like, okay, registered. Yeah. So it's a chocolate truffle. So the ganache, the interior, has pho spices in it. No beef.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Vegetarian friendly. Okay, so we've got savory course, and then we have our fruit course, passion fruit vanilla bean, guava pâte de fruits, lychee, and then, there's durian. How can I forget durian? You know what durian is?
I don't.
Oh, girl, it's called the king of fruits. It's banned in some hotels in Thailand and Singapore because the smell has such strong fumes that people can feel offended by it.
Oh, wow.
I think it smells like heavenly custard. You might think it smells like trash and vomit.
That's like the Jelly Bellies back in the day. Like they would have actual vomit.
Oh, yeah. The Harry Potter flavor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's one of the most expensive fruits in the world.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And it looks like a spiky porcupine. And
I've seen it. Now that you say it, now I know exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you walk in a durian farm at night, it might fall on your head and kill you. Why? So don't you go walking around in a durian grove.
Why would I go walking around in a durian grove?
I don't know.
And B, why would I die?
Why was a thriller always like a woman walking down a dark alleyway? Why are you doing that?
I think they should do durian farms.
You know what I mean?
No, not really. No. No.
Okay.
That's a little far-fetched, but that's still super cool. So you sell that box like little.
Yeah. The little
can you get mail order? Can I order this?
We are familiar with the internet. And if you live in the United States, it can't get mailed to you.
Okay, I'm getting some of that mailed to me. I can't eat chocolate because I don't process sugar, but I want to see it.
Oh, don't do that then.
Well, I'm not going to eat it. I'm just going to give it to my family and see it. I think
it's really great. Like at a dinner party, you can cut them up and have a little tasting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I don't have to eat it. I just want to experience I don't want to see the dang box. I bet it's pretty. Okay, pretty. So tell people how they can find your book and how they can find your chocolate and anything else that you want them to find. Are you doing another tour?
Yes, my paperback is coming out April 29th. So I'll do a little baby tour.
Yay.
Tour.
That's awesome.
So the chocolates, you can find them at socolachocolates.com, SOCOLA. Me, I'm on Instagram at Susan Lieu, Lieu. You can go on my website, susanlieu.me, if you want to stream 140 pounds.
I'm totally doing that. I've read the book.
Well, know. I can't wait for you to watch it. Let me know.
I know. I'm excited. I will. Okay, but so you got to do, before we end, you got to do the thing. So you, Susan, may not be familiar with this, but Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag outfit of the day, OOTD. And for this podcast, I've repurposed that into hashtag observation of the day. So what is your observation of the day? It can be anything. Anything at all.
I think we've lost the dark arts of listening.
Okay. That's a deep one. That's alrighty then. I
Come
thought you
on,
were going to be like,
I do vulnerability stuff.
I was like, maybe she's going to talk about chocolate. Okay. So yeah, you got to explain that just a little bit. Why is listening a dark art? Just explain that to me.
It's lost. It's lost. And if we can master it, we can have great magic in our relationships. Oftentimes when I'm talking to someone, I realize that the person is actually not responding to what I said.
Right.
They're just going to talk about them.
Right.
Right. Or make it about them and take up that oxygen around them. I'm like, interesting. And I started to ask myself, does this happen in most interactions? And I would say about 80% of interactions, it does. Where I think we're so starved for that emotional connection and being seen that we project and then make it about us.
Yeah. That's
But
a very good observation.
The thing is the biggest gift that we can give to other people is deep listening. And so my challenge to listeners today is that can you approach your next interaction where you have deep listening for someone? They say something, ask them a question back about that instead of relating it to yourself, and really just give them the space to be seen and heard and see how that can transform your connection with them.
So not to make this about me, but that is
But if you did.
But if I did, no. But what I'm saying is that is exactly so, sometimes I wonder why I have someone on, not why, but I'm like, well, am I going to be able to connect this in my mind to something that resonates with me? Me. But that is something that I tell our clients all the time is so important. And that actually is a great observation for this because I get asked all the time, what should I say? What should I ask? And I'm like, just listen to the person you're talking to. And I'm talking about in Rush now, to make a connection, listen to the person. And like, rather than think about like what you should say or what you're going to say, like actually listen to what they say. And then that's when the genuine conversation and connection happens. So yeah, that's a very good reminder / observation for anybody. Just listen.
Yeah. And if you're craving donuts or sour straws or whatever, you might be pregnant.
Yeah. See, there you go. That bringing it down. And if you're craving some sort of garbage smelling chocolate.
Yeah. I need a Slurpee.
Yeah. She was like, girl, you're pregnant. I was like, what? Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure. And I feel like that you are, whether you're trying to do it or not, you're giving us all a space to feel and deal with the past and the trauma. And you're doing it in a way that is clearly working for you and everyone who has the extreme privilege of reading your book or being at one of your shows. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. Okay, so the original thing I wanted to talk about today on Time Out with Trisha, I will still talk about, but something that my guest just brought up, and I didn't quite explain myself well, the listening. So this week in particular, we have a lot of clients that are going off for spring rush. And we've gotten a lot of last minute panicked requests like, oh my gosh, what should I talk about? What am I going to talk about? Give me some talking points. And I've really resisted doing that. And the reason I've resisted doing that is obviously they know not to talk about the 6 Bs. That's so tired. Like I don't even need to talk about that. But as far as having talking points, the thing that I've been trying to get across to them, and what Susan, the guest I just had on, was saying, is listening. That is one of the crucial ways that you can connect, and that's in Rush too. So when you're talking with someone, instead of worrying about asking the right questions or pre-planning it, just take a breath and listen to the person you're talking to. And then you can ask them thoughtful questions that keep the conversation flowing, but it's not a pre-planned, as Meredith Ponick said on this podcast, this is not an interview. So you don't want to pre-program questions. So that was the one thing I wanted to talk about. And then the mother-daughter relationships are something that I obviously haven't experienced firsthand, but I have witnessed enough of these dynamics to know that preparing for and going through Rush can put a strain on even the very best mother-daughter duos. So do yourself a favor. If you can swing it, have an expert, us, be the ones to guide you through this process. Advice from mothers often falls on deaf ears, and daughters do not think you know what you're talking about. They trust that we do and are much more receptive to Rush advice, and which leads mothers free to just be the support that is so needed during Rush, instead of the one helping your daughter pivot and advise during the process. That's our job. So if you can swing it, just be a support and try to stay off Facebook groups and try not to panic. You're prepared. They've got this, and just be the mom that they need, which is, honey, you've got this. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mad Rush podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. For additional Rush tips, updates, and more, please follow me on Instagram at Rush with Confidence. If you would like to reach out to us, or for more information, please email info@madrushpod.com. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry and Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Trisha Adams.